The next component that I'm going to model is this lower left arm in the scissors. Now each one of these four arms is slightly different, but they are almost identical with just a couple of changes. So we'll model one component and then we'll use that component to create the other three components. For example, we can see that there's a difference here in the thickness from here to the other side is less than the thickness on this lower arm. There's some differences in the teeth forms as well. So we'll see all of those differences. We'll model this first component. So if I go down in the drawings and I find the lower left arm, and again, I recommend that you attempt to model this component yourself and then return to the video and follow my instructions on how I model it. Now we're going to have to be careful about how we model these teeth so that when we go from the lower left to the lower right and to the upper left and the upper right arm, when we make the changes, the model parametrically changes. So we'll use extreme care when we are modeling this, particularly this geometry over here. Make sure that after you've made your attempt that you follow my steps precisely. One thing that you might notice, if I can zoom in here and see this, that the center points of these arcs are not along the same curve as the center point of these two arcs. So these three arcs are in a different location, the center point, than these two. They have a different center, or on the arc circle or pitch circle, they're on a different pitch circle diameter. So I will go to the front view and I'm going to turn off the base plate, and actually let's just turn off all of our components so that they're not obscuring what we're doing. And I will then create a new component, and I'm going to call this component lower left arm. I'm then going to expand and turn on the visibility of the origin, and I will do a new sketch on the XZ plane, and I'm going to draw a rectangle from the origin below the XZ plane, and I will dimension the width of this rectangle as 6 inches. I will then draw a center point arc, and I could do this as a circle and trim it up. I'll do a center point arc though, and so I'll do an arc, center point arc from this position, the center of it, over to here and up to about like that. Now I was expecting to automatically put a tangent. We may not need a tangent since it's to that point, but let's go ahead and try to add that tangent, and so it tells us that it didn't really need that tangent. I'm going to change these three lines to construction, and so I only leave this bottom line and this arc. Let's go ahead and dimension this arc, and I'll dimension that as 0.625. I'm then going to draw a construction line out here, so let's change that to construction, and I'm going to draw a tangent arc off of the end of this arc up to about like that, and I will dimension this arc radius 0.25. I want this point right here to be below this line down here someplace, and then the top of this arc up here above that line, about like that. I'll go ahead and drag this point back to this arc. Now actually it might put it on the midpoint of that arc, and I don't necessarily want it on the midpoint of that arc, so I'm just going to do trim wherever it's at now. And then I'm going to draw a line up from this arc, and I'm going to put it up about like this, and I'm going to put in an angle dimension between this line and this line, an angle of 32. I'll make this arc tangent to that line, so I'll do tangent this arc to that line. Now we're going to have a lot of unconstrained geometry here, which is not a practice that I normally use, so we'll have to be very careful as we do this. Because the geometry is unconstrained, it will be somewhat difficult to control. I'm going to do a tangent arc off of the end of this line, and I'll come around about like that, and I'm going to dimension this arc radius 0.115. I'll draw a line from the midpoint, or the center point, from the center point of this arc back to the origin, and I'm going to change this line to construction, and I want to dimension the aligned length of this line. So I'll do dimension, I'll select that line, and I'll put in 1. I'm going to turn off the visibility of the origin for now for this component, and I had to be careful on the next few steps. So I'm going to draw a line. I want it tangent to this arc, but I don't want it horizontal, and bring it up here a little bit above the horizontal, about like that, and then make it tangent. So I'll do tangent between this arc and this line. Now I want this line symmetrical about this line, but I can't use mirror because this line is going to end up being shorter, about like that. And again, be careful you don't get a horizontal constraint on there. In fact, let's go ahead and put a dimension between this line and this line. Put in an angle dimension of 20, and then I want to also make this line and this line symmetrical about this line. So I'll do symmetry. I'll select this line and this line, then the line of symmetry, and it's telling me that I don't need that constraint because I have the tangent with the arc here, and I have the tangent with the arc here, and I have the 20 degrees, so it's symmetrical about that line, but it'll be shorter than this line. I'm going to do a tangent arc off of the end of this line, and I'll make this arc equal radius to this arc. So I'll do equal, this is equal radius to this arc. I will then draw a line from the midpoint or the center point of this arc down to the origin, and I'll change that line to construction. I'm then going to mirror this line and this line about this line. So I'll do mirror. I will select this short line, I'll select this line, I'll mirror that about this line. I need to make this point and this point coincident, so I'll do coincident this point to this point. Now right now I can drag these, and I want to put a center point arc off the end of this line, so I'll do a center point arc, and I will need to make sure that that center point is, and I did tangent arc, not center point arc, and need to make sure that that's at that end point. And then I'm going to mirror this line and this line about this line. So I'll do mirror, I'll select this short line, I'll select this line, I'll mirror that about this line. I need to make sure that these 2 points are coincident, so I'll do coincident, this point and this point. And then I'm going to do a tangent arc coming over here. So I'll do a tangent arc from here over about like that. I'll make this point coincident with that point. I'll mirror this line and this line about this line, so I'll do mirror this line and this line, mirror that about this line, make these 2 points coincident. I'll do a tangent arc off the end of this arc, do coincident this point to this point, and then I'm going to draw a line down here longer. Now it may be the same length as this line, I'm not really sure. We're not going to use that line, but let's put in the angle dimension between here and here. I'll do an angle dimension between this line and this line, and I want that to be 28 degrees. Now notice that when we put that in, that a good portion of the geometry becomes constrained, everything but the end of this arc. So at the end of this arc, I'm going to put a line in here. I want it tangent to that arc. You may have to put it out here someplace first and then put it tangent. And I want it symmetrical with this line about this, but of course it's not the same length. I'll do symmetry. So I didn't mirror it, I do symmetry instead. So I do symmetry, this line and this line about this line. Okay, that turns black except for the end point. I'll do a tangent arc off the end of this. I want this arc to be equal radius to this arc. I'll then do another arc, and this time let's do a center point arc. So I'll do an arc, center point arc, and the center of it is at the origin, the beginning of it's here, and it'll come over something like that. I want these 2 arcs to be tangent, so I'll do this arc is tangent to this arc, and I want this arc to be equal radius to this arc. I'll then put a tangent point arc here, and so I'll do a tangent arc over here. Now we could do this with the line command. If I click and hold, it will come out as an arc, and can then come over here and then come over horizontally and put this horizontal line here. I want this line to be tangent, so I'll be tangent here to here, and then equal this arc equal to this arc, equal radius. I'll dimension the distance from here to here, 0.875. Okay, so we have all of this geometry is fully constrained, and so later on we're going to end up coming back and we'll change either this angle or this angle for one of the other arms. So I'm ready to do this end over here. So let's drag this point over here. And it's been a while since I saved it, so make sure you save often. Let's drag this back here about like that. And then I'm going to draw a circle from here down to here. I will draw a line and I want it tangent to this arc someplace. I'll click and drag. It's going to put a tangent on here, and I should have left well enough alone. There we go. I'm going to come down to here. I'll put an angle between this line and this line of 19 degrees, and then I'm going to draw a circle 0.25, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'll draw it from about here over to here, and I'm trying to decide if I want to go beyond that point. So we'll click here, and I also want this point to be coincident with this circle, so I'll do coincident. This point is coincident with the circle, and we could have done it on this end, either end. I will dimension the distance from here to here as 0.2, and then I'm going to trim out this and trim out this. I might leave it the way it is. Let's first change this line and this line to construction lines. Okay, so I have those two lines as construction. We don't really have to trim this, but I'm going to try to trim it anyway. So I'm going to trim this larger circle first, and then I'm going to trim this circle. So everything so far is black, and then I'm going to trim this circle and hope that it stays fully constrained. When I did that last circle, I lost my fully constrained condition. If I drag this, I may be able to see a reason why. And I'm trying to drag it, but I don't see it dragging anywhere. And so I think it is still fully constrained. But what we'll do is we'll put a, I'm trying to decide if I'll do a horizontal constraint between this point and this point. Let's try that. So I'll do horizontal between this point, and I'll hold down the shift key, and I'll get the midpoint of this line. And it tells me I don't need that, and I don't really want to leave this in this condition, so I'm going to undo back to where that was showing as black. Okay, so it's showing as black here. We don't necessarily have to trim that because we're going to pick this area in here anyhow. Alright, so I think that we have this sketch finished, so I'll finish sketch and save it. Now before I do the next sketch, I want to know the outermost point of this set of teeth as we continue on with the part. So I'm going to go back and edit this sketch, and I'm going to put in a construction line in here from here over to straight over horizontally. So if I projected this straight down, this is the outermost point right there. Let's go ahead and change this to construction. And I don't know if I'll need it, but I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'll do a line from here over to the outermost point here, and I'll change that line to construction. Alright, I'll finish that sketch, and then we'll go to the top view. We'll do a new sketch on this XY plane. I'm going to project those 2 points that I just defined. So I'll do P for project, and I'll get this point right here, and I'll also get this point right here projected to my next sketch. Okay, I can hide that sketch number 1 now. I know the overall length of this part is from here to here. I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'll put it out in space about like this, and then I want the midpoint of this line to be at the origin, and then I want this point, or the midpoint of this line, to be at that point, and I'll dimension this as 1.375. Now I'm reconsidering that dimension. We may end up changing that, but for now we'll leave it as it is. I will draw another rectangle over here at this end, and for this one I'm going to draw a construction line from here to here. So I'll draw a construction line from here to the midpoint of this line. I will change that to construction and also make that horizontal, and then I'm going to draw a arc from here to here, and I'll put that. Now I don't want that arc out here tangent. I want it about like this. I will dimension the radius of this arc as 1.25. I'll dimension the distance from this point over to this line as 0.75, and I'll make the center of this arc coincident with this point. So I'll do coincident center of that arc to here, and I will make this line equal to this line. It all turns black. I'm going to change this line to construction. Okay, so we have our sketching done for this end. I'll finish that sketch. I'm going to go back and turn on the visibility of sketch 1 again, and I'll do a new sketch on the XZ plane. I'll do P for project, and I'm going to project this construction line, and I'll project this construction line. I'll go to my front view, and I'm going to temporarily turn off the other two sketches. I don't need to see that origin plane either. I need to temporarily turn on this sketch number 2 again, and I'll do P for project, and I'm going to project this point right here or this line that ends up being the same location, and then I'll hide sketch number 2. And I thought I did it, but I forgot to press OK on that. So P for project, I'll select that line, and we have to make sure that we say OK, so it doesn't automatically do it unless you say OK to accept that. Then I'll hide that sketch. If I look directly at this, I'm going to draw a rectangle from the end of this line up about like that, and I made a mistake on that because I don't want it from this line. I want it actually down from this line, so let's undo that. But I'm going to draw a rectangle over here, and then I want this line to be down to here, so I'll do coincident this line to this point and this line to this point, and then I'll put the dimensions on here. So I'll dimension the distance from here to here as 0.0625, and I'll dimension this height as 0.125. Now I may put some construction lines in here so that I don't get confused later on like I just did as I was creating this. So I have these construction lines to show me the location of this rectangle, and I can change this one to construction line as well. And then I'll come over here to this end, I'll change this to construction, and on this end I'm going to do the rectangle from here up, and I want that to be object line, so I'll turn off construction. And then I'll do equal, the length of this line is equal to the length of this one, and the length of this one is equal to the length of this one. So everything turns black and it's all fully constrained. I have a minimal amount of dependency from one sketch to another. So if I change sketch number 1, the other sketches should update depending on the parameters of sketch 1. Before I start creating my geometry, I also want to put a circle at this point the same size as this circle. So let's go back to sketch number 1. I'll edit that sketch and I'll draw my circle, and I'll do equal, this circle is equal to this circle. Okay, everything turns black, it's all fully defined, and then I'll do extrude, and I'm going to select this area. I want to go symmetric, a total distance of 1.5. I'll do shell, and I'll do tangent edge, but if I select tangent edge, it goes all the way around and selects this face, which I don't want. I'll go ahead and select this face, and I'll select this face and this face. I'll select that face. I'll select this hole, and then I don't want this face though, so I'll hold down the control. I'll turn off tangent edge, and I'll hold down the control key, and I'll unselect that edge. Okay, so I have all of it going around here over to here, except for this face, this one, and the corresponding face on the other side. I've selected the two holes. I'll put in my thickness is 0.0625. I'll say OK to that. Then I'm going to do an extrude cut of this profile and this profile, and I'm going to tell it to go through all. So I need to make sure that I have that on cut, and I'll tell it to go through all, and it's giving me an error because I have it in a location here where it's not cutting anything at that location. So I made a mistake. I'll have to go back and figure out where this is supposed to be at. So I intended from this point to the center of this arc to be 0.75, so I have an incorrect dimension on that sketch. So I'm going to edit that sketch, and I will turn on the visibility of the sketch number 1. And so this 0.75 is supposed to be from here over to here. So I'll delete that 0.75. I'll move this whole sketch this way, and then I'll dimension the distance from this point over to here, and I may need to project that point. So I'll do P for project, and then I'll dimension from this point to here 0.75. Now hopefully I did everything correctly in that sketch number 3 updates. So I'll finish sketch, and I see sketch number 3 was tied to this line right here, so everything updated correctly. I'll hide sketch 1, I'll do my extrude again, I'll select here and I'll select here. And so if we look at this from the top view, we don't necessarily need this extrusion over here, and I may end up just taking that out, and we need this, so we'll tell this to go through all, and so it gives us an error again because we don't really need this one. So I'm going to control unselect this. Now hopefully we didn't really need that to cut away. I'll flip that direction to go through all, and so I've cut that. I may not have needed this rectangle down here, and so I'm going to change that to construction. In case it turns out that I figure out why I put this in originally, we can go back and turn that back to object line, but I don't think that we need that. So we have this arc extrude cut through here, and I'll then do extrude, and I'll select this rectangle, and I'll select this rectangle, and I'm going to tell it to go symmetric, and the distance is through all, so we'll cut this on both sides. So I cut this slot over here, this slot, and this slot here and here. I'm then going to do a fillet, and I'm going to select the inside arcs first. Okay, so I'll select those inside arcs. I'm going to make that radius 0.0625, and then I'll do plus to add another fillet size, and I'm going to select the outside arc here and here, and I'm going to make that 0.125 and say OK to that. Right now, if I have done everything correctly, we can convert this to a sheet metal part. And so I'm going to go to sheet metal, and I'll say convert to sheet metal. I'll select the part, and it picks up the thickness, detects that automatically, and I'm going to set that to be steel. And then I want to check the flat pattern, so I'll create flat pattern. I'll select on this bottom face, and I'll say OK to that. And I get an error on the flat pattern, so I need to figure out why I get an error on that flat pattern. And my guess is it is this location right in here. So what I'm going to do is edit that sketch and make this distance on the other side, for that slot on the other side of that line. So let's go back and edit sketch number 3, and I want to move this over to the other side, and I'm trying to decide the fastest way of doing that. Let's try deleting this construction line, and it's still constrained, so that's not going to give it to us. We have a constraint in here someplace that we need to remove in order to move that to the other side. Let's try deleting this line. We'll delete both of these construction lines. It's still fully defined. Let's go up here and click on this point, and let's remove this constraint. Okay, so now we can move this over, and now let's do coincident again. So this point, and I had that line pre-selected, so I need to undo that. Okay, so I don't have anything selected. I'll do coincident this point to this line. So we did have it over here on this side. I'm going to move it to this side, and again I'll put those construction lines in here so that later on I can figure out what it was that I did. A week from now or a year from now, it can be difficult to recall exactly what you did. I'll finish sketch, and so now I've moved that slotted cut over to the other side of this, and we'll see now if we can get the flat pattern. And so I'll go to flat pattern, and still give me an error. So I don't know why it is giving me an error, but I went back and I deleted the original convert to sheet metal, and I'll do the convert to sheet metal again, and I'll select the part. And so remember, the only thing we did was we moved this slot back this way a little bit, and then I'll do create flat pattern. I'll select a stationary face, and so now that it works, so it appears the fact that we hadn't moved that face before we created a sheet metal part, when it saw it as a failed condition after we edited it, it still didn't repair the body. If we look at this in a wireframe view, With a sheet metal part, you should only have one boundary going all the way around the component, and I think that's what we would have seen, as we would have seen in this slot a slight different edge here where that edge wasn't perpendicular to the flat pattern. So in any case, we got this to work as a valid sheet metal part. I will change the appearance of the body, and I'll drag my desired color onto that body. And so the next step is we will go and assemble this and create the additional components.